In 1863, foreign warships appeared in New York Harbor, not Union, not Confederate, but Russian, and they may have prevented World War I, before World War I even happened. Why did the Tsar of Russia send fleets to both coasts of the United States during the Civil War? Were they preparing for battle, offering aid, or was something deeper at play? In a war defined by brother against brother, one of the most powerful empires in the world quietly entered the scene, not with muskets, but with maneuvers that may have changed the course of history. Had Britain or France entered the war, the United States might have shattered, but Russia made sure they didn't. Let's explore how and why. The year was 1861. The United States had erupted into civil war. The Union in the North, determined to preserve the nation and end slavery, found itself locked in deadly combat with the Confederate South. But far across the Atlantic, in the winter palaces of St. Petersburg, another empire was watching closely: Russia. The Russian Empire, under Tsar Alexander II, had just undergone a seismic transformation of its own. In 1861, the Tsar had freed over 23 million serfs, an act comparable to Lincoln's own Emancipation Proclamation. Both leaders ruled vast, diverse nations in turmoil, and both understood the chaos of internal revolution. Alexander II once said, "It is better to abolish serfdom from above than to wait for it to abolish itself from below." His words echoed a sentiment Lincoln would later express: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." But Russia had its own enemies, chief among them Britain and France. And as the American Civil War escalated, so did fears that these European powers might intervene. What would happen if they chose to recognize the Confederacy? The Union would face a global crisis. The chessboard was set. Russia was about to make its move. In late 1863, something extraordinary happened. A Russian naval fleet arrived unannounced in New York Harbor, its ships gleaming in the autumn sun. At the same time, another Russian squadron dropped anchor in San Francisco Bay. American newspapers erupted with excitement. Parades were held, crowds swarmed the docks. The Russians were hailed as heroes, potential allies in the Union cause. But beneath the cheers and fanfare, a far more calculated message was being sent. Russia hadn't come just to shake hands. Imagine the scene: Union soldiers on shore staring in awe at unfamiliar sails, unsure whether to fear or cheer, the smell of salt and smoke in the air, children waving flags while whispers passed through the crowds. Why are they here? Russian officers stepped ashore, exchanged greetings with Union officials, and offered cordial toasts. Yet beneath every gesture was a quiet threat to any foreign nation considering intervention. These ships were not merely goodwill ambassadors. They had standing orders. If war broke out between Russia and any European power, they were to place themselves under Abraham Lincoln's protection and strike back from American ports. These weren't symbolic instructions, they were sealed, written by the Russian Admiralty, and issued to every captain. It was a veiled but unmistakable warning to Britain and France: interfere in America's war, and you might be facing Russia too. And there was more to it. The Russian fleet had not come to America purely out of friendship. Back in Europe, the January uprising in Poland had sparked tensions between Russia and the Western powers. Britain and France, sympathetic to the Polish rebels, were considering intervention. By sending its fleet to US waters, Russia shielded its ships from a possible blockade and parked them in a neutral harbor, ready for action if war erupted in Europe. Why would the Tsar risk so much to support a divided and war-torn nation? The answer lies in imperial rivalry. Russia had been humiliated in the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, by, you guessed it, Britain and France. Now, with tensions simmering once again over Poland and other flashpoints, Russia sought to counter its old enemies by extending a hand to the United States. Meanwhile, Britain and France had their own reasons for leaning toward the Confederacy. Chief among them was economic dependence on southern cotton. Before the war, the South exported roughly 75% of the world's cotton, feeding the mills of Lancashire in England and the textile centres of France. The Union's naval blockade triggered the Lancashire cotton famine, throwing thousands out of work and igniting political pressure. And beyond economics, there was strategy. A divided America meant a weaker America. France had already placed Archduke Maximilian on the throne in Mexico, flouting the Monroe Doctrine. A Confederate victory would have legitimized French imperialism and given Britain a more pliant trade partner to the south. In fact, in 1862, British Prime Minister Lord Palmerston and Foreign Secretary Lord John Russell seriously debated offering mediation between the Union and Confederacy. This was no neutral proposal. It was a political maneuver toward recognizing the South. Napoleon III had indicated France would follow Britain's lead. For Lincoln, Russia's quiet support was invaluable. Britain remained bitter over the Trent affair, a diplomatic standoff after Union forces captured 2 Confederate envoys from a British ship. France was entangled in Mexico, but Russia stood apart. As Lincoln once wrote, "The struggle of today is not altogether for today. It is for a vast future also." He knew the long game. And in that game, international neutrality, or better yet, subtle favor, could tip the scales. No formal treaty, no declarations of alliance, but the message was loud and clear. And the world was listening. One of Lincoln's greatest fears was that Britain or France might officially recognize the Confederate States of America. That single move would transform a domestic rebellion into an international war. Southern ports would open to European trade. The North would be squeezed militarily and diplomatically. But the Russian fleets helped tip the scales. Their presence sent a chilling message. Any European recognition of the Confederacy could provoke war with Russia. That threat, unspoken but understood, was enough to make even imperial powers hesitate. In a way, Russia became the silent guardian of the Union cause. Not through declarations, but presence. Not with promises, but posture. And the strategy paid off. France continued its ill-fated adventure in Mexico, but stopped short of open Confederate support. Britain stayed on the sidelines, reluctantly. The Union, bloodied but intact, gained the breathing room it needed. There's something poetic, almost fateful, about the parallel paths of Lincoln and Tsar Alexander II. 2 leaders, oceans apart, both facing civil upheaval and the moral weight of liberation. Lincoln would become a martyr to the cause of freedom. Alexander would later suffer a similar fate, assassinated by revolutionaries in 1881. But in the 1860s, their reforms sparked global debates on human rights, labor, and national identity. In 1862, Lincoln wrote to Congress, "In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free." That same spirit guided Alexander II's declaration. The existing order of owning souls cannot remain unchanged. And their symbolism didn't end in speeches. In New York and San Francisco, Union and Russian officers marched side by side in parades. Naval reviews were held, bands played, the stars and stripes waved beside the double-headed eagle. It wasn't just ceremony, it was a subtle display of unity in a world watching for weakness. While no formal alliance ever formed, the symbolism was powerful. 2 giants of the age reshaping their empires from within. And for a fleeting moment, their paths converged, not on a battlefield, but in a harbor. So here's the question we leave you with. What if Russia had done nothing? What if their ships had never sailed into American waters? Would Britain or France have tipped the balance? Would the Confederacy have gained the recognition it so desperately sought? In the great theater of the American Civil War, Russia played a quiet but pivotal role, a shadow ally, whose actions may have held the Union together just long enough to survive. Sometimes history isn't written in gunfire or speeches. Sometimes it's written in the silent glide of warships across the sea. If you found this hidden chapter of history as fascinating as we did, consider subscribing for more stories that dive beneath the surface of the past. And let us know in the comments, do you think Russia's involvement truly changed the course of the Civil War? Because history is never as simple as it seems.